So today I want to talk a little bit about the man at the Vatican who calls himself Father, and any religious figure who calls himself Father is in direct rebellion against Israel's Messiah, Yehoshua, for he said, "Call no man your father, for you have one Father in heaven." And so, if a religious figure tells you to call him Father, he is by default either the father of lies or the follower of the father of lies. Before I get started with this video, just a reminder to everyone that during these videos, I now, in honor of the Jews who suffered throughout the Crusades, all the way from the Constantine to the Holocaust, I honor those Jews who suffered at the hands of Christians by wearing the yellow clothing of shame and the yellow star. And may their plight and their persecution be remembered when Jerusalem is once again reappointed. So now I know that my videos might be a little confusing to the Jews, and I don't address the Jews that much because really, in all truth, that is going to happen. The Almighty Himself is going to address them or address us. I believe it is my duty to address the Christians for their sins against the holy people. So, before I go into Scripture, I'm going to article on Breitbart.com. So the headline is Pope Francis, opponents of mass migration sow violence, racial discrimination, and xenophobia. Remember what I said. I'll remember what the Messiah said. I will go to that particular passage. Okay. Matthew 23, verse 9. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Okay? So, when he calls himself Pope, he is in direct rebellion, falling away, as it were, against the true Messiah. So, while we're reading this, just keep that in the back of your mind. In his new message for the World Day of Peace, Pope Francis denounced those who questioned the wisdom of mass migration, accusing them of demagoguery and promoting xenophobia. Those who decry the risk posed to national security or the high cost of welcoming new arrivals are guilty of demeaning the human dignity due to all as sons and daughters of God. Of course, the word God is in reference to Odin or Woden, the Norse god, and not the Elohim of Israel. Francis said in the New Year's message. To resort to such rhetoric, the false father continued, people are sowing violence, racial discrimination, and xenophobia, which are matters of great concern for all those concerned for the safety of every human being. The Catholic Church celebrates the World Day of Peace each year on New Year's Day. Now, this is the first time I've heard of that. You see, I'm so far removed from the Catholic Church, I don't know what they do. I mean, except for I know they promote paganism around the world and are guilty of crimes, unspeakable crimes against the holy people for thousands of years, or nearly thousands of years. Interesting. This is the first time I didn't know. Celebrates the World Day of Peace each year on New Year's Day. So, folks, what we have to do is we need to mark this down. Because remember what Paul said, when they shall say peace, then comes sudden destruction, and they shall not escape. The people of the earth shall not escape. So then, each year, when this particular event happens, or when we are approaching to the World Day of Peace, we must prepare each year for the possibility of what Paul said occurring, that it may occur right afterwards. And here we are just a few days after this event. So we really need to be especially careful today. When it also commemorates the solemnity of Mary, Mother of God. See, that's another one of those false traditions that the Catholic Church has. Our Father in heaven has no mother. There is only one Elohim. That is our Father in heaven. In his annual message for the Day of Peace, he opted once again to underscore the plight of migrants and refugees, and has on several occasions recently. This is a long article, and I think everyone who is listening here has gotten the message. So what I'm going to do is this. We'll try to save all these scriptures that I've did my research for this on, and continue down this path to expose this man like I said I was going to. All right. So in Daniel 7, it talks about the 10 horns, 3 being uprooted by an 11th horn, which came after the 10 horns, and the 11th horn being a little horn. All right. I'll start in verse 1 of chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions of his head upon his bed, and he wrote down the dream and the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my visions by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. The great sea is the Mediterranean Sea. Okay? Don't ever forget that. And the 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. That was Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And the second, behold, this is in verse 5, another beast, a second like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between the teeth of it. And they said unto it, devour and eat much flesh. Of course, that was the Medo-Persian Empire. And the Medes basically ruled over the Persians, which is why the bear laid on one side. All right, and they said unto it, devour and eat much flesh. In verse 6, after this I beheld another beast like unto a leopard, which had upon its back 4 wings of a fowl. This was the Grecian Empire, and the 4 wings are the foreheads of the Grecian Empire after Alexander the Great. 4 wings of a fowl, the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given over it. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, and had great iron teeth. So this was the beast of iron. The beast of iron was Roman-dominated Europe. And there's a lot of people out there that like to go and say Rome, 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 Rome. No, it's Roman-dominated Europe. And let me explain how, so that you are not deceived by this, by the people who just say Rome rather than Roman-dominated Europe. You have to say Roman-dominated Europe. Verse, okay. Iron teeth, it devoured and broke in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, 10 horns or 10 kings. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. So the little horn became the 11th, and it came up after the 10 horns, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Those 3 horns who were plucked up by the roots, if I can remember, they were the Visigoths, the Heruli, and the Vandals. Those were the 3 horns that were uprooted by a man at the Vatican. Let's see if I can get the actual name of the person. Vandals. Now, I may even be able to, by doing some research, okay, so I will read a little bit from, it's called SundayLaw.net, and it's on chapter 6, and it'll help. It may not be entirely accurate, but it'll give you a bit of a rundown about these 10 kings and possibly who it was who uprooted 3 of them. The identification of the 10 horns of Daniel 9 is firmly established in history. In his excellent work, Horae Apocalypte, the historian Eliot provided 2 lists of the 10 nations into which the Western Roman Empire disintegrated. So there's 2 lists, which means one of them might be the correct list, you see. And it's pretty close. I would say it's pretty close to being accurate. One of them would be, but both of them are close to being accurate. 2 lists of the 10 nations into which the Western Roman Empire disintegrated. His second list states that these 10 to be the Alemanni, Anglo-Saxon, Franks, Burgundians, Visigoths, Suevi, Ostrogoths, Heruli, Bavarians, and the Vandals. In his first list, Eliot had substituted the Lombards for the Bavarians. A study of the Gibbon's classic Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire indicates that the Lombards hold the rightful place in the 10. So as you can see, there is a small dispute as to maybe one of them. But for the most part, this list is correct. And I have to add myself, each of these kingdoms have a king, even though these kings don't have a kingdom anymore. For instance, the Anglo-Saxons or the British have a monarchy. In all these particular places, they have their established monarchy, whether it be a constitutional monarchy or the monarchy doesn't do anything. It just sits there right now. Okay, so this list, I think I just mentioned the list. Alemanni, Anglo-Saxons, Franks, Burgundians, Visigoths, Suevi, Ostrogoths, Heruli, Bavarians, and the Vandals. Or it could be the Lombards and the Vandals. Okay. If, as the reformers contended, the little horn represented the papacy, then history must testify to this fact. In 538, the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, Justinian, bestowed the title of universal bishop upon Pope Vigilius. The popes, by an act of self-appropriation, had long before taken the religio-political title of Pontifex Maximus after Emperor Gratian ceased to use that imperial title in 375. History must also testify to the identity of three horns, kingdoms that would be uprooted at the time of the rise of the papal power. So the little horn was not Constantine, although Constantine began the great rebellion against Israel's Messiah. But the little horn came later. We have noted that the Ostrogoths, did I say Visigoths or Ostrogoths? See, that's why I need to read when I do this video, so I get get my statements accurate. We have noted that the Ostrogoths, Vandals, and Heruli have vanished from Europe, leaving no trace in the 21st century. See chapter entitled Little Horn Among the Ten Horns. But when did this loss of identity take place? Amazingly, all three vanished shortly after the time in which they had reached the zenith of their power. Their decline in each case was dramatic, unexpected, and sudden. This prophecy thus is a most compelling one. Odovacar, the Heruli leader, had only 62 years before 538 unseated the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire in 476. This led to the fall of that mighty empire. At this pinnacle of power, Odovacar had extended his nation into a domain where Emperor Zeno of the Eastern Roman Empire would tolerate no more usurpation of imperial power by the Heruli. Emperor Zeno commissioned Theodoric, the king of the Ostrogoths, to deal with this Herulian affront to the empire. Theodoric needed no urging from Zeno, for he too was envious of Odovacar's success. Zeno's command was motivated by a second consideration. The Ostrogoths then occupied territory close to Constantinople, and the emperor hoped that by this military distraction he could ease the pressure he received from the powerful Ostrogoths. The conquest began in 487 After 50 years, the Heruli were quelled, never again to arise as a nation. So at that point in time, the first of the three horns had been uprooted. By mid-6th century, the Heruli had vanished from history. This is in the Encyclopedia Britannica 1990 edition, Art Heruli. Justinian became emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire in 527. A man of religious inclinations, he instituted holy wars against the Vandals and the Ostrogoths, the latter of which were then in control of Rome. So at that time, the Ostrogoths were in control of Rome. Procopius, Justinian's campaign historian, revealed that Justinian's motivation was to protect the Christians. By Christians, he meant Catholics. He was protecting the Catholic faith against Arian invaders. The Arians, not to be confused with the Nazis and not to be confused with the Iranians. The Arians taught that Christ was altogether human and not divine. I'll go into that some other time. This is not about arguing that point today. The Vandals were a Teutonic race related to the Burgundians and the Goths. In 439, the Vandals captured Carthage, the most significant city in the Roman Empire, and held it until 533. The Vandals in the 5th century became the leading maritime power in the Mediterranean. Notice what it said in Daniel 7 about the Great Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. In 455, their king, Gaiaseric, conquered Rome and appropriated its wealth to himself. With the exception of one king, Hilderic, the Vandal rulers were Arians, not Germans, not meaning Nazis or not meaning Iranians, but of a particular religious sect of the Catholics. When Hilderic's cousin Gilmer imprisoned him, Justinian found an excuse to attack. Under Justinian's general, Belisarius, the Vandals were overthrown in 536. So that is the second horn that was uprooted by the little horn. After this, the Encyclopedia Britannica 1963 edition, volume 22, page 973 reports the Vandals disappeared from history. The second horn had been uprooted just 2 years prior to Pope Vigilius exercising the title of Universal Bishop, which Emperor Justinian had accorded by the words creating him head of all the holy churches. You see? You see how this happened? Another historical work described the demise of the Vandals in the words, "They disappeared as a mist." And this was by C.W. Previte Orton, Shorter Cambridge Medieval History, 4th edition, University Press, 1953, volume 1, page 189. For those of you who are close to a library. But a third horn, the Ostrogoths, held a stranglehold in Italy, the conquest of which they had made at the behest of Emperor Zeno in destruction of the Heruli tribe. In 538, Justinian's forces evicted the Ostrogoths from Rome. They were extinct before 554, Encyclopedia Britannica 1990 edition, Art. Goths. The destroyers of the Heruli, Vandals, and the Ostrogoths thought they were carrying out their own purposes, but in reality they were fulfilling the word of Elohim that had given through his prophets, a word proclaimed at a time when none of these nations existed, a millennium prior to their prophesied demise. It is little wonder that the Apostle Peter wrote as the date for his martyrdom approached. We also have a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto you do well that you take heed, as unto a light that shines in a dark place until the day dawns and a day star arises in your hearts, first knowing first that no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation. For the prophecy came not in the old time by the will of man, but by holy men of Elohim, spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. 2 Peter 1, verse 19 through 21. And I will stop right here. As you can see, when the little horn arose, the first thing that happened was the extinction of the Ostrogoths, the Heruli, and the Vandals. And who is sitting in this little horn today? The father of lies. Yes, the father of lies. So, I will go there. And I know that Christians today love to use these words in John 8 against the Jews. But Christians today need to look in the mirror. Because what they have accused the Jews of doing, that is what Christians are guilty of. I will go to the scripture and I will point it out. John 8, starting in verse 31. Then Yeshua, not Jesus, not Jesus. Then Yeshua, or Yehoshua, to those Jews which believed on him, said, if you continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we be of Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How do you say you shall be made free? Yeshua answered them, verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever commits sin is the servant of sin, and the servant abides not in the house forever, but the Son abides forever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, then you shall also be free. And this Son is going to make Israel free. It is prophesied in the prophets, just as Peter said, the words of the prophets or the prophecies are not by anyone's private interpretation. If it is written that Israel is going to be saved, then Israel is going to be saved. And you cannot sit here and try to tell people, well, give your opinion about what that means. That's the reason why Paul wrote in Romans 11 verse 27, all Israel shall be saved. And yet people will, wait a minute, that doesn't mean, how dare you? How dare you question the words of Paul, the only apostle to the Gentiles? How dare you? Now, I will continue. Verse 36, if the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's seed, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. Uh-oh. In that generation, the leadership of the Jews sought to kill Israel's Messiah. And it didn't take long before, in among the Gentiles, what did they seek to do? They sought to exterminate Israel's Messiah, replace it with their own false Messiah, call him a different name, and then try to exterminate the Jews, the children of Abraham. Now, he just said here, I know that you are the children of Abraham. He just said that. Verse 37, I know that you are Abraham's seed, but you seek to kill me, because my word has no place in you. I speak that of which I have seen with my father, and you do that which you have seen with your father. You do what you saw your father do. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Yeshua said unto them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. And so while the Christians point the finger at the Jews, accusing them, whose works did the Christians do? They did not do the works of Abraham. Because Abraham was not a murderer, you see. If you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that has told you the truth, which I have heard from Elohim. Abraham did not do this. Abraham did not go out and try to exterminate the Jews. You do the deeds of your father. You Christians, you follow after the father of lies at the Vatican, the little horn. That's what you do. And I dare say that all the sects of Christianity, all the different denominations are followers of that man at the Vatican. It's true. Because you see, the children of Abel, among them, were all murdered. None were left alive, you see. Now, people will say, how can this be if Yeshua Messiah said that the gates of hell will not prevail against his congregation? Well, that answer to that is simple. If the Catholic Church killed them all, he is saying when he says that the gates of hell will not prevail against them, what he means is this. In the day of resurrection, the gates of hell will open up. Hell is not what Christianity says it is today. Hell just means the grave. So the gates of the graves will open up, and these people will rise up in judgment against the Catholic Church and all its denominations of Christianity. That's right, the gates of hell will not prevail against them. You do the deeds of your father, and they said unto him, we are not born of fornication. We have one Father, even Jehovah. That's what they said. And so, he gets right down to the nitty-gritty. Why? Because they were murderers. Murderers are of the devil by default, just so you know. Okay? Verse 42, Yeshua said unto them, if Jehovah was your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from Jehovah. Neither came of myself. In other words, he had no say in the matter. Just like when I was conceived of my father, I had no say in the matter. But he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word, you are of your father the devil, and the lust of the father of your father you will do. And what is that? What is he going to describe next, folks? Are you ready? He was a murderer from the beginning. So as this last generation, the last generation of the leadership of the Jews in the days of Israel's Messiah being the suffering servant, because they rejected him and that they were murderers, they were of their father the devil. So the same with this father of lies who sits at the Vatican, beginning, well, like I said, it started with Constantine, but the little horn began at around 300, 500 or to 300 to 500 AD. Okay? And this is the father of lies, the man who sits at the Vatican. He is the incarnation, or he is the carnation, or however you want to say it. My speech isn't so well, I'm sorry. Of the father of lies. That's who he is. So in essence, the man that sits in the Vatican is Satan himself. Because he now sits on Satan's throne. And I know that Satan's throne was one time in Pergamus. That was when Zeus's throne was in Pergamus. Now they have Jesus's throne in Rome. You see. All right, so I don't really, for the sake of time, I will stop right there. I think I've made my point. And so then, it says in Daniel 7 and verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Verse 9, and I beheld until the thrones were cast down and or overthrown. There's another way of reading it if you want to go to Strong's Concordance and look it up for yourself. And the Ancient of Days did sit. Who is the Ancient of Days? The Ancient of Days is our Father in heaven. His name is Jehovah. He is the only one. He has no mother. He has no father. He is the Father. From all things came from him. So, the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and his head of his hair were like pure wool. White like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as a burning fire. Just like it you read in Ezekiel, I believe it's chapter 1. You want to look at that? Verse 10, a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and judgment was set, and the books were opened. And I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which, who spoke? That little horn, that man who sits at the Vatican today. And I beheld until the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, given to the burning flame, as to the rest of the beasts they had their dominion taken away, and their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. And I saw the night visions, behold, one like the Son of Man came with the cloud of heaven, and then came to the Ancient of Days. Where was the Ancient of Days? Once the 77s are finished, the Ancient of Days is going to come to Jerusalem. Our Father in heaven is going to come to Jerusalem, and then the Son of Man is going to come to him. Let me repeat myself. The Ancient of Days is going to come to Jerusalem on his throne, which is, in extremely crude wording, an aircraft that is described by Ezekiel, if you want to go look. I should say a spacecraft, a heaven craft. That is his throne. It moves very quickly. His throne will be on the earth in Jerusalem. And this event in Daniel 7 will happen. And then the Son of Man, verse 13, came with the cloud of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, and they, which means the angels, brought him near before him. And what happened next? The Ancient of Days gave him dominion and glory and a kingdom. What kingdom is that? It is in Jerusalem. That all people, nations, and languages should serve him, and his dominion is an everlasting kingdom which shall not pass away, and his kingdom in which shall not be destroyed. Verse 15, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him of the truth of these things. And he told me, and made me know the interpretation of those things. These great beasts, which are four, okay? Babylon, ancient Babylon, Medo-Persian Empire, the Grecian Empire, and Roman Europe. These four are the four kings which shall arise up out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High, that's the holy people, that is, the Jews, the Israelites, and all Rahab's and all Ruth's, shall take the kingdom. Which one? The one in Jerusalem. The one that has been trodden underfoot by the Gentiles for so long. And they shall possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, that's Roman Europe, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet, and of the 10 horns which were in his head, and of the other which came up, before whom 3 fell, and even of that little horn that had eyes and had a mouth that spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came. So you see, Roman Europe, even to this day, go take a look at Mount Zion. Who has their clutches on it? The Vatican. And they continue to prevail against them, yes, all the way through the Holocaust. And the United Nations still rail against Israel to this day, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. That's the holy people. That's the elect. That's Israel. Was given to Israel. And the time came that Israel possessed the kingdom. It says the saints. The saints means the holy people. When you read in Romans 11, you find that it says If the root is holy, then so are the branches. Therefore, according to the words of Paul, the holy people are the 12 branches of Israel. That means they are the saints. I don't care what that man at the Vatican tells you. He is a liar. He is the father of lies. In him dwells Satan himself. Same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And at that time, the time came when the 77s are finished. 77s of Daniel 9 are finished. And they are finished. I've proven that. The saints possessed the kingdom. You see, Israel is already in possession of Jerusalem and East Jerusalem. But the time has not come yet to kick out the Vatican out off of Mount Zion. But that is about to happen. Verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be different from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth. And boy, they did. And shall tread it down. And boy, did they ever. Yes, they went around the world with their song, as they sing it today, onward Christian soldiers with the cross of Jesus. Making war and tearing everything up. And broken pieces. And the 10 horns which out of this kingdom are the 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and they shall be different from the first, or he shall be different from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. I just mentioned to you who the 3 kings were. I did not pull these things out of my hat. They are in the Encyclopedia Britannica and other well-versed sources. And he shall speak great words against the Most High. Indeed he does. He calls himself Father. And in so doing, he speaks against the Most High. You have but one Father who is in heaven. And he shall wear out the saints of the Most High. So who did he persecute? I am wearing your clue. This is who he persecuted. This. He shall wear out, persecute the saints of the Most High, and think to change the times and laws. Indeed, they changed everything. They changed the calendar. They changed Shabbat. They changed everything into paganism. And they shall be given to his hand until a times, and dividing of a time. So, indeed, the man who sits on Caesar's seat, Vaticanus, that's what that means, the imperial seat of Rome, this began. So according to Daniel, the little horn begins, or the beginnings of the little horn. And little horn came after the 10 horns rose up. But the beginnings of the little horn was at Rome. Therefore, Caesar was the one who, Caesar Nero, destroyed Jerusalem and did it through Vespasian and Titus, the Roman generals, who later became Caesars themselves. A time, times, and dividing of a time is 3.5 years from 67 AD spring until the fall of 70 AD. Verse 26, but the judgment shall sit, and they, who are they? the holy people, the saints, the Israelites, will take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. So as Rome consumed Jerusalem, so shall Rome be consumed until the end, unto the end, or at the end, at the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, which means shall be given to Israel, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions shall serve and obey him. That is the Son of Man, the Jewish Messiah, whom the Christians today call the Antichrist. Verse 28, hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. So now you know where the father of lies dwells. And I have one more thing for those of you who say that, Henry, you are wrong. The elect are not Israelites. No, you are wrong. And I will prove it. And remember what Peter said. The words of the prophets are not for private interpretation. So, when we read Isaiah 45, beginning in verse 4, remember these words. The words of the prophets are not for private interpretation. Therefore, the words of the prophets interpret themselves. You have no right to say that Israel is no longer Israel. If you say that, you are a liar and the truth is not in you. Now, let us go to Isaiah 45. Verse 4, for Jacob, my servant's sake, and Israel, my elect. Did you get that? This is not for private interpretation, folks. When he says Israel, my elect, that's what he means. Don't you sit there and try to twist the words of the prophets, because Peter said those who twist the words of the prophets and twisted the words of Paul, they do it to their own destruction. And Israel, my elect, I have called you by your name. I have even surnamed you, though you have not known me. They are still his elect. Because at the appointed time, after the 77s are finished, as written in Daniel 9, then comes mercy on Israel and Jerusalem, reconciliation upon Israel and Jerusalem, restoration of Israel and Jerusalem. And I've told you, the 77s are finished. I gave you the calculation. It is 5th grade math. And when your preacher tries to twist the math to make Israel's Messiah the Antichrist, they do so to their destruction. If you don't believe it, I will go to Peter, and I will read it to you, and you can decide whether you want to listen to the twisters or whether you want to believe the prophets exactly as they say. Because Jeremiah 31 verses 31 through 34 is going to happen. And there is nothing that man at the Vatican or you can do about it. Okay? So let us go 2 Peter 3:16, folks. As in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which some things hard to be understood by those who are unlearned and unstable. So what Peter is saying is, those who are unlearned and unstable, they find Paul's words hard to understand. Why? The hardest of all for them to understand is Romans 11 and verse 26. And he says, and just like they do with the other scriptures, what other scriptures do they twist? The prophets. And he says they do so to their own destruction. Now, I can use a different I'll use a different translation just to get a better idea. We'll use the Berean version. Starting in verse 15, and esteem the patience of our master as salvation, just like our beloved brother Paul also wrote to you according to the wisdom having been given to him, as also in all his letters speaking them concerning these things, among some things are difficult to be understood by the ignorant and unestablished, who distort to their own destruction, just like or as also the other scriptures. So he accused those who distort the words of Paul of also distorting the other scriptures, meaning the prophets. And remember, it was Peter who said, the words of the prophets are not by private interpretation. So therefore, he says, those of you who twist the scripture, the words of the prophets and the words of Paul, you do so to your own destruction. So do not, I repeat myself, do not twist the words of Isaiah. In Isaiah 45, verses 4 and 5. Don't ever do it. If he says Israel is his elect, Israel is his elect. If Paul says Israel is his elect, Israel is his elect. Romans 11:26. I'll start in verse 25. But I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits. He's speaking to the Roman church. That blindness in part, partial blindness happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved. And those of you who say, well, he didn't mean all Israel, shut up. Let your mouth be stopped. Let you be unable to speak. All of you who say, well, he didn't really mean to say all Israel. Let your mouth be stopped. Shut up. All Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant, this is the everlasting covenant, this is the new covenant, as written in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. That covenant, the one that lasts forever, the new covenant. Unto them when I shall take away their sins. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies of the Romans for the Romans' sakes. But as concerning the election, Paul says that they are the elect for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's sake. Therefore, Israel is the elect. Israel is the holy people. All Israel are the saints of the Most High, as written in Daniel 7. And to those of you who do not believe that, you are of your father, the devil, who sits at the Vatican.